Every year, across the globe, the world pauses. Carols fill the air, families gather, and on December 25th, we celebrate what we believe to be the most famous birthday in history, the birth of Jesus Christ. It's a tradition so powerful, so deeply embedded in our culture, that we rarely stop to ask a simple, crucial question. What if I told you that date, December 25th, is found nowhere in the Bible? Not a single verse in any of the four Gospels mentions it. For the first 300 years of Christianity, it wasn't even celebrated. So, why do we celebrate on this day? And more importantly, if it wasn't December 25th, when was Jesus really born? The answer has been hidden in plain sight, scattered across the pages of the Bible in a series of forgotten clues. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is a biblical investigation. Today, we will uncover 7 hidden clues that dismantle the December myth and point us to the true date that aligns perfectly with history, with Jewish tradition, and with biblical prophecy. Get ready to see the Christmas story in a completely new light. Our first clue is hidden within the very event that sets the entire nativity story in motion, the census. The Gospel of Luke, chapter 2, tells us, in those days Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken of the entire Roman world, and everyone went to their own town to register. Why a census? To understand this clue, we must understand the Romans. They were masters of logistics, engineering, and control. To them, an empire wasn't run on faith, it was run on data. A census wasn't just a head count, it was the primary tool of imperial power. It was used to determine the tax base, to know how many men were eligible for military service, and to manage the vast resources of an empire that stretched from Britain to Egypt. It was the ultimate act of power, a declaration that every life, from the richest senator to the humblest carpenter, was on the books and under the emperor's authority. This decree forced Joseph, a descendant of the royal line of King David, to undertake an arduous journey. He had to leave his home and carpentry business in Nazareth, in the region of Galilee, and travel back to his ancestral town of Bethlehem, in Judea. And he had to bring his betrothed wife, Mary, a woman in the final stages of her pregnancy. Let us not gloss over this detail. The journey was about 80 miles, or 130 kilometers. This was no leisurely stroll. It was a multi-day trek, perhaps a full week, on foot or by donkey, through the hilly, difficult terrain of Samaria and Judea. Even for a healthy person, it was an exhausting trip. For a woman 9 months pregnant, it was an almost unimaginable ordeal. And this brings us to the critical detail, the key to our first clue. When would an empire famed for its efficiency and pragmatism schedule such a massive, disruptive movement of its population? Let's consider the climate of Judea. Midwinter, around late December, is not a pleasant time. It is the rainy season. Nighttime temperatures can drop close to freezing. Simple dirt roads could turn into impassable mud tracks. Heavy rains could cause sudden flash floods in the dry riverbeds, known as wadis. It was a difficult time for tending livestock. To force millions of people, including the elderly, the sick, and pregnant women, to undertake long journeys under the worst weather conditions of the year would be a logistical nightmare. It would cause massive discontent, slow down the registration process, and be entirely contrary to the pragmatic Roman mindset. Logic dictates they would choose a far more favorable time. The most likely seasons for a census would be the spring or the autumn. In the spring, after the rainy season, the weather was mild, the landscape was green, and the roads were dry. In the autumn, after the harvest, the weather was also pleasant. The granaries were full, providing resources for travel. Furthermore, these seasons often coincided with major Jewish festivals like Passover in the spring or the Feast of Tabernacles in the autumn, times when people were already accustomed to gathering and traveling. So, the very first detail of the Christmas story makes a powerful argument that it did not happen in the dead of winter. The census points to a more logical time in the spring or fall. What is truly remarkable is how God used an emperor's tool for taxation as an instrument for prophecy. Over 700 years earlier, the prophet Micah had declared in his book, chapter 5, verse 2, "But you, Bethlehem Ephrathah, though you are small among the clans of Judah, and out of you will come for me one who will be ruler over Israel. And now, with the stroke of a pen, a pagan emperor in Rome, obsessed with his own power, was unwittingly setting the stage for the fulfillment of that divine plan. Caesar Augustus thought he was controlling his world, but he was merely a pawn in a much larger, cosmic chess game. This census was no coincidence. It was the means God used to bring his son to the exact place at the precise moment. Our first clue is not just about the weather. It's a powerful reminder that even in the midst of human chaos and control, there is a divine plan unfolding perfectly, and it points away from December toward a different time of year. Our first clue, the Roman census, points us away from winter and toward the spring or fall. But to narrow it down further, we need a more precise starting point, and for that, the Bible gives us a surprisingly detailed and mathematical clue, hidden in the story of a forgotten priest. His name was Zechariah, the father of John the Baptist. The Gospel of Luke, chapter 1, begins not with Mary or Joseph, but with Zechariah. It tells us, in the time of Herod, king of Judea, there was a priest named Zechariah who belonged to the priestly division of Abijah. This isn't just a casual detail for historical flavor. The division of Abijah is a specific, verifiable piece of data that acts as a key to unlock the entire timeline of Jesus' birth. To understand its significance, we have to go back to the Old Testament. In the book of 1 Chronicles, chapter 24, King David organized the thousands of priests descended from Aaron into 24 distinct groups, or divisions. Each division was assigned to serve in the temple for a 1-week period, twice a year. This created a precise, rotating schedule that was meticulously followed for centuries. Zechariah belonged to the 8th of these 24 divisions. The Jewish religious calendar begins in the spring, in the month of Nisan, which corresponds to our March or April. So, by counting forward from the start of the year, we can calculate with a high degree of accuracy when Zechariah's division would have been on duty. The first division would serve in the first week of Nisan, the second in the second week, and so on. The 8th division, the division of Abijah, would therefore have its first turn of duty in the 8th week of the religious year. This falls around the end of the Jewish month of Iyar and the beginning of the month of Sivan, which on our modern calendar corresponds to late May or early June. It was during this specific week of service, while Zechariah was performing his sacred duty of burning incense in the holy place of the temple, that the angel Gabriel appeared to him. The angel delivered a world-changing message. His elderly, barren wife, Elizabeth, would conceive a son. Luke tells us that after Zechariah completed his week of service, he returned home, and after this, his wife Elizabeth became pregnant. This is our chronological anchor. The conception of John the Baptist, the forerunner of the Messiah, happened shortly after this priestly service, meaning it occurred in mid to late June. This seemingly minor detail about a priest's work schedule is, in fact, one of the most powerful clues in the entire Bible for dating Jesus' birth. It's a timestamp hidden in plain sight. It gives us a firm starting point, a date from which we can now build the rest of our timeline. It shows us that God's plan is not vague or generic. It is precise. It operates on a divine timetable, woven into the very fabric of his people's worship. The birth of the Messiah wasn't an isolated event. It was perfectly synchronized with the ancient, sacred rhythms of the temple. Zechariah's story is a powerful testament to the fact that there are no insignificant details in God's plan. What seems like a footnote in a genealogy or a detail in a priest's schedule is, in fact, a crucial piece of the puzzle, placed there for those with eyes to see. And this clue, the conception of John the Baptist in June, is about to lead us directly to our next, even more startling revelation. Our last clue gave us our anchor, the conception of John the Baptist in late June, a date firmly rooted in the ancient priestly schedules of the temple. For centuries, this was seen as just a part of John's story. But the Gospel of Luke, with the precision of a historian, intentionally left it as a divine breadcrumb, a carefully placed timestamp for us to follow. And the very next verses of the story pull on that thread, leading us from the grandeur of the temple in Jerusalem to an event of quiet, world-shattering significance. This brings us to clue number 3, the Annunciation. The biblical camera now pans to a complete contrast. Not a grand city, but a small, obscure village in the northern region of Galilee. Nazareth was so unremarkable in the ancient world that it's never mentioned in the Old Testament or by contemporary historians like Josephus. It was the kind of place you came from, not a place you went to. It even had a reputation, as recorded in the Gospel of John when a disciple scoffs, "Can anything good come from Nazareth?" And the main character of our scene is not an elderly, respected priest from a famous lineage, but a young girl, perhaps no more than 14 or 15 years old. A virgin named Mary, pledged to be married to a local carpenter. It is here, in this place of ultimate humility and obscurity, that the Gospel of Luke, chapter 1, verse 26, gives us an incredibly precise and critical time marker. The verse begins, "In the 6th month of Elizabeth's pregnancy, God sent the angel Gabriel to Nazareth." Let's pause on that phrase. In the 6th month. Luke, the physician and meticulous historian, is not being casual. He is establishing an unmistakable, unbreakable chronological link. He is locking the timeline of Jesus directly into the timeline of John the Baptist that he just established. This is not a once upon a time story. It is a historical report. The math is simple, but its implication is profound. If Elizabeth's pregnancy began in late June, her 6th month, the time of Gabriel's visit to Mary, would fall in late December. This is the moment of the Annunciation. In the quiet of her humble home, Mary is confronted by an angelic being and given a message that will alter the course of human destiny. "You will conceive and give birth to a son, and you are to call him Jesus. He will be great and will be called the Son of the Most High." This is the moment of the Incarnation, the instant the Word became flesh. Let that sink in for a moment. The biblical timeline, anchored by the verifiable priestly schedule of the temple, places the conception of Jesus in late December, the very time of year that the world now celebrates his birth. This is a stunning revelation. It suggests that over the centuries, the collective memory of the Church held on to the correct season of the miracle. But the focus shifted. The invisible private miracle of conception was eventually overshadowed by the visible public event of birth. The tradition, it seems, remembered the date, but forgot what the date was for. This also gives us a fascinating insight into the origins of the December 25th tradition. It wasn't just a random date chosen to replace a pagan festival. It was likely a historical echo, a memory of this profound, sacred event in December, an event that was then displaced by 9 months in the popular imagination. The light of the world was kindled in the womb at the darkest time of the year, in the northern hemisphere, the winter solstice, a powerful symbol of light entering the darkness. And this clue, the conception in December, now leads us directly and logically to the final calculation needed to determine the birth date. It provides us with the last piece of information we need to solve the puzzle. The Annunciation has given us our most crucial piece of temporal evidence. The divine conception of Jesus occurred in late December. This single, biblically derived fact changes everything. It reframes the entire Christmas story and allows us, for the first time, to move from estimation to calculation. This brings us to clue number 4, which is not a hidden detail, but the simple biological truth that follows, the 9-month pregnancy. If Jesus was conceived in late December, we simply need to follow the natural course of a human pregnancy. We add 9 months. December plus 9 months brings us to September. More precisely, a conception in late December would result in a birth in late September or early October of the following year. This is not speculation. This is not a complex theory based on obscure texts. This is simple biblical arithmetic, derived directly from the details Luke provides in his Gospel. By following the chronological chain of events from Zechariah's service in the temple to the 6-month gap, to the 9-month gestation due to we arrive at a birth date not in the cold of winter, but in the heart of autumn. This timing is also rich with profound spiritual symbolism. The light of the world is conceived during the darkest time of the year, in the northern hemisphere, the winter solstice, the moment when the darkness is at its peak and the light begins its slow return. And he is born 9 months later, in the autumn, a season deeply associated with the final harvest, with gratitude, and with the most significant Jewish festivals of gathering and divine presence. Every detail seems to have a purpose: the conception in darkness, the birth in the season of fulfillment. It paints a picture of a divine plan, unfolding in perfect harmony with the cycles of the earth and the sacred calendar of His people. So now, our timeline is becoming sharp and clear. The Roman census pointed us generally towards spring or fall. The priestly schedule of Zechariah, combined with the Annunciation and a simple calculation, has given us a much more specific and biblically supported window: September or October. Now, the crucial test. We must take this calculated date and hold it up against the other physical, tangible clues in the Nativity story. If this autumn time frame is correct, everything else should click into place. What about the most famous attendees of Jesus' birth? The shepherds. What does their story tell us? Our timeline, built upon the solid foundation of the temple's priestly schedule, now points firmly to an autumn birth for Jesus. But to be certain, we must test this theory against the other details provided in the Nativity account. And the most iconic attendees of Jesus' birth provide our fifth and perhaps most vivid clue: the shepherds. The Gospel of Luke, chapter 2, verse 8, paints a picture so familiar it has become a staple of every Christmas card and nativity play. It reads, "And there were shepherds living out in the fields nearby, keeping watch over their flocks at night." We have heard this verse so many times that we often miss the powerful clue embedded within it. Let's break it down. They were living out in the fields and keeping watch at night. What is winter like in the hills of Judea, around Bethlehem? While we may picture a gentle, snowy landscape from Christmas cards, the reality is different. December is the heart of the rainy season. It is cold, damp, and often miserable. While snow is not common in Jerusalem, the higher elevations around Bethlehem can and do see frost and occasional snowfall. It is not a time for living outdoors. For shepherds, this was a time to bring their flocks down from the open hillsides. The sheep would be gathered into communal sheepfolds or sheltered corrals for protection from the cold, the rain, and the increased threat from predators like wolves, who would be bolder in the harsh weather. To leave a flock exposed in an open field, especially at night, during the coldest and wettest part of the year, would be poor animal husbandry at best, and outright negligent at worst. So, when would shepherds be living out in the fields with their flocks day and night? There are two primary seasons. The first is spring, specifically during the lambing season around March and April. This was a critical time for the flock. Newborn lambs are incredibly vulnerable, both to the elements and to predators. It was absolutely essential for shepherds to be with their flocks 247, to assist with births and to guard the young. The image of shepherds watching their flocks by night fits the spring lambing season perfectly. The second, and for our timeline, more significant season, is the autumn. After the main grain harvest in late summer and early fall, the fields would be open for gleaning. Flocks would be brought in to graze on the leftover stalks and fallen grain. The weather is mild and pleasant, cool at night but not harsh. It was a common and necessary practice for shepherds to stay with their flocks in the open fields during this period to fatten them up before the onset of the winter rains. So, the detail of the shepherds in the fields does two things. First, it acts as another strong piece of evidence against a December birth. And second, it perfectly corroborates the autumn time frame we have already calculated. A birth in late September or early October would fall directly into this season of shepherds, watching their flocks by night in the harvested fields around Bethlehem. Like the census, this detail is not just a piece of scenery. It is a subtle but powerful clue, a historical and agricultural timestamp that confirms our timeline. The shepherds were not freezing in a winter blizzard. They were likely enjoying the cool, clear air of an autumn night, a night that was about to be interrupted by the glory of God. Our timeline has been built, and the physical evidence of the shepherds in the fields confirms it. All signs point to an autumn birth. Now, we must ask a deeper question. Was there a theological reason for Jesus to be born at this specific time of year? This brings us to clue number 6, the clue that connects our historical timeline to the very heart of Jewish spiritual life. The Feast of Tabernacles. Known in Hebrew as Sukkot, the Feast of Tabernacles is one of the three great pilgrimage festivals in the Jewish calendar. Celebrated in the autumn, typically in late September or early October, it was a week-long festival of immense joy and gratitude. It commemorated the 40 years the Israelites spent wandering in the desert after their exodus from Egypt, living in temporary shelters, or tabernacles, completely dependent on God for their survival. It was a celebration of God's faithfulness and His physical presence dwelling among His people. The timing is a perfect match. The autumn birth date we calculated leads us directly to this most joyous of Jewish festivals. Could it be a coincidence? Or was God's plan so intricate that He would time His Son's arrival to coincide with this powerful prophetic symbol? The answer is hidden in the first chapter of the Gospel of John. John 1:14 is one of the most famous verses in the Bible. In English it reads, "And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us." But the original Greek word that we translate as dwelt is eskenosin. It doesn't just mean to live or to reside. Its literal root meaning is to pitch a tent or to tabernacle. So, a more literal and powerful translation of the verse would be, "And the Word became flesh and pitched His tent among us," or "He tabernacled among us." The language John chose is a direct, unmistakable reference to the Feast of Tabernacles. He is making a profound theological statement. He is telling us that Jesus' birth was the ultimate fulfillment of what the festival had always symbolized: God in the flesh, literally coming down to pitch His tent and dwell among humanity. What better, more perfect time for Emmanuel, which means God with us, to enter the world than during the very festival that celebrated God dwelling with His people. This connection elevates our investigation from simple historical detective work to a revelation of divine poetry. It suggests that Jesus' birth was not a random event, but the climactic note in a symphony that had been playing for centuries. The major events of Jesus' life and the early church aligned perfectly with the Jewish festival calendar. He was crucified on Passover. As the ultimate Passover lamb, the Holy Spirit descended on Pentecost, the festival celebrating the harvest and the giving of the law. It is perfectly logical and theologically consistent that His birth would also align with a major festival. The Feast of Tabernacles is the perfect candidate. It was a time of joy, harvest, and celebrating God's presence, a far more fitting atmosphere for the arrival of the Savior than the cold, dark imagery of midwinter. Our biblical and agricultural clues have all converged on a single powerful time frame, the autumn. But to lock this in, we need one final piece of evidence, a clue that comes not from a priestly schedule or a festival, but from a hard, verifiable date in secular history. Our seventh and final clue is found in the dark and brutal reaction of the villain of the Christmas story, King Herod the Great. The Gospel of Matthew, chapter 2, tells the famous story of the Magi, wise men from the east who followed a star to Jerusalem, seeking the newborn King of the Jews. Believing a king would be born in the capital, they went straight to the current king, Herod. Matthew tells us, when King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. Herod, a notoriously paranoid and ruthless tyrant who had executed members of his own family to protect his throne, was not about to tolerate a rival king. He deviously told the Magi to find the child and report back to him so that he too could worship him. Warned in a dream, the Magi never returned to Herod. And when Herod realized he had been outwitted, his paranoia turned into a murderous rage. Matthew recounts the horrific event known as the Massacre of the Innocents. He gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity who were 2 years old and under, in accordance with the time he had learned from the Magi. This monstrous act, in its very detail, gives us our final, crucial timestamp. Herod's decree to kill all boys 2 years old and under tells us that Jesus could have been anywhere from a newborn to nearly 2 years old at the time of the Magi's visit. So, how does this help us? Because we know, with a high degree of certainty from non-biblical historical sources, when King Herod the Great died, the first-century Jewish historian Flavius Josephus, in his work Antiquities of the Jews, recorded Herod's death in great detail. He noted that a lunar eclipse was visible from Jerusalem shortly before Herod's passing. Astronomers and historians have been able to pinpoint this eclipse to a specific date, March of the year 4 BC. The logic is now inescapable. If King Herod died in 4 BC, then both the visit of the Magi and the subsequent massacre must have occurred before this date. And if Herod's order targeted children up to 2 years old, it means Jesus must have been born at the latest in 4 BC, but more likely sometime in 5 BC or 6 BC to fit that 2-year window. This final clue, drawn from secular history and astronomy, is the piece that locks our entire puzzle together. Our biblical calculation pointed us to an autumn birth. The historical data from Herod's death gives us a birth year of 5 or 6 BC. When you combine them, the picture becomes crystal clear. Jesus was most likely born in the autumn around September or October of the year 5 BC. This date perfectly aligns with the census, the priestly schedule of Zechariah, the 9-month gestation, the shepherds in the fields, the Feast of Tabernacles, and the known historical timeline of King Herod. All 7 clues point to the same, consistent conclusion. So, the investigation is complete. Let's review the evidence. The Roman census suggests a spring or autumn timeline. The priestly schedule of Zechariah gave us a starting point, leading to Jesus' conception in December and a calculated birth date in the autumn. The shepherds watching their flocks by night in the open fields strongly corroborates this, ruling out a cold, wet winter. This autumn timeframe aligns perfectly with the theology of the Feast of Tabernacles, celebrating God tabernacling among us. And finally, the historical data from the death of King Herod locks our timeline into the year 5 or 6 BC. All 7 clues, both biblical and historical, point to the same, consistent conclusion. Jesus was not born on December 25th, but rather in the autumn, likely between September and October of the year 5 BC. So why do we celebrate on December 25th? The answer is not biblical, but historical. In the 4th century, as Christianity became the official religion of the Roman Empire, the Church needed a way to bring pagan populations into the fold. The most popular festival of that time was Dies Natalis Solis Invicti, the birthday of the unconquered sun, celebrated on December 25th to mark the winter solstice when the days begin to grow longer. Church leaders strategically chose this date for Christmas, transforming a pagan festival about the rebirth of the sun into a Christian holy day celebrating the birth of the Son of God, the true light of the world. It was a brilliant act of cultural appropriation that helped Christianity spread throughout the empire. In the end, does the exact date truly matter? The apostles themselves never celebrated Jesus' birth. Their focus was always on his death and resurrection. Knowing the precise day is not a matter of salvation. But what this investigation does reveal is the incredible depth and precision of the biblical narrative. It shows that the Gospels are not just simple stories, but complex texts filled with historical, cultural, and theological layers, all working in perfect harmony. The true miracle we celebrate is not the date on the calendar, but the event itself, the incarnation, that God so loved the world that he became flesh and pitched his tent among us. That is the message that changes everything, no matter what day it occurred. If this journey into the hidden clues of the Bible has been meaningful to you, please let us know. Leave a comment with your thoughts. This search for truth is a journey we take together as a community. And if you are in need of prayer, please don't hesitate to share your request. Like this video to help this knowledge reach more people, and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the mysteries of the faith. Thank you for watching.